We have to go to the root. We have to go to the cause. Dealing with the condition itself is not enough. And it is because of our effort toward getting straight to the root that people oftentimes think we're dealing in Haiti.
Mr. Officer, what did you do to the black man? Tell me, what did you infer? Did you see him as a downright criminal? Tell me who him gonna hurt. Tell me, who are you protecting? Tell me, who do you really serve? What if you got a ticket like Sandra Bland? Do you ever party like Oscar Grant? What about Philando Castile or Eric Garner? What if you couldn't breathe? Do you have a hoodie like Trayvon? Or ever walk from the store like Mike Brown? Ever drop a sleep like Guyana? And the tears still a cry for Breonna. Chant their names. Won't see another black mother sent to an early grave. Give us some answers right now. You got to change this somehow. How many lives will be taken? How many tears will we cry? For you to see the sad reality upon a picket sign. 400 enough years of slavery, and we're not free just yet. Unsystemic brutality, chant their names so we won't forget. What kind of injustice reach Georgie one day? Same kind of thing did reach Freddie Gray. Do you have a cell phone like Stefan? Or play a little music like Jordan? Can we just roll the tone like a man? So me know say the system a fraud, designed to keep the black man down. Guilty with no proof, I just a run around. Chant their names. Won't see another black mother sent to an early grave. Give us some answers right now. Chant their names. You got to change this somehow.
We are oppressed. We are exploited. We are downtrodden. We are denied not only civil rights, but even human rights. So the only way we're going to get some of this oppression and exploitation away from us or aside from us is come together against the common enemy.
I'm Terry Gibbs, and I'm really thrilled to be here today with you for this event, Countering the Roots of Anti-Black Racism from Atlantic Canada to Canada's Complicity in the Crisis in Haiti. Before I begin, I just wanted to acknowledge that while we're not gathered together in person, we are connecting and learning together virtually in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the Treaties of Peace and Friendship, which the Mi'kmaq and Wolastoq people first signed with the British Crown in 1726. And the treaties that are in effect here encourage us to respect each other, to work together for the benefit of all, and to take care of the earth. We further acknowledge that people of African descent have shared these lands for over 400 years in Nova Scotia, and over 50 strong and resourceful African Nova Scotian communities exist today. On behalf of the Global Social Justice Project, Unama'ki College, the Atlantic Regional Solidarity Network, and Black Lives Matter Fredericton, and our co-sponsors, the School of Arts and Social Sciences at Cape Breton University, the Cape Breton Partnership, Peace Quest Cape Breton, and the Animal Ethics Project. It's my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome you all to this gathering. We're really grateful, especially grateful to the special guests joining us from Fredericton, Montreal, and Haiti today. And we'll introduce them shortly. I just wanted to say a couple of housekeeping items, things to bear in mind so that you can fully enjoy the event. If you put your Zoom to speaker view, that will give you the best access to the event and to seeing everyone. If you'd like to ask a question, please throw it in the chat. And we apologize in advance if we don't have the opportunity to get to all the questions today, but please know that we really value your thoughts and ideas, and anything that you send to us, we'll take into consideration and share with people after the event if we don't get to it today. And also look to your feedback on the chat, so please enjoy. I just wanted to say a very brief introduction so you know who I am and why I'm here. I'm a settler of Welsh and English descent, and I've lived in Unama'ki since 2004. And I'm a mother of 2 boys, and I also have extended family in Panama. And I'm an educator and an activist, like many people in this room. As a settler, I've been really interested in how we can kind of leverage our positions of privilege and power where we have them to challenge oppression in the here and now, and how we can kind of build links between the various communities and individuals that are looking to challenge oppression around the world. And personally, I've been really inspired by liberation movements throughout the Americas, and I've worked in solidarity with Latin America for many years. So I'm wearing a couple of hats tonight, both the Global Social Justice Project and the Atlantic Regional Solidarity Network, which is dear to my heart. And I think all of the organizers and the participants, and I'm sure many in this room, have been brought together sharing a deep belief in the power of education to transform things, the power of sharing knowledge and stories, which we're all doing, and mostly in the power of regular people to change things for the better. And that's always been true throughout history. So when we have these events, we're really hoping to build relationships, not just to talk about issues, but to build relationships and solidarity going forward. This series is The Politics of Hope, which this particular event is part of. The idea behind it was sort of thought about as we were coming into COVID, but sort of this idea of we don't want to go back to business as usual. We want to look at building more resilient, compassionate, and inclusive communities right in our immediate environments, but also looking globally. And most of the issues that we talk about in this series are not new, whether it's racism or sexism or homophobia or all of these sorts of things, the climate change and the connections between them. I think it's just that people's sense of urgency around a lot of it has grown, and people's sadness and frustration. So the idea for the series was to bring people together to have a place to talk about that and to build strategies for action going forward. This particular event, which we're really excited to host, comes from a couple of different ideas and thoughts. Over the past year, COVID-19 has clearly exposed injustices and inequalities that have long existed. And the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor by police in the US sparked expansion of the Black Lives Matter movement. We're really glad to have Black Lives Matter here with us this afternoon. And protests spread around the world, including in Wabanakik, our Atlantic Canada, where 2 indigenous people, Chantel and Rodney Levi, were shot by police in June of 2020 in separate incidents. And exposing the links between these events and then the ensuing uprisings, and also the ongoing colonial and neo-colonial foreign policy towards places like Haiti. Our guest speakers, Georges Gabrielle PAUL, Jafrikayiti and El Jones, are going to talk today with us about how systemic anti-Black racism affects policies in Atlantic Canada, and also what it's meant in terms of Canadian foreign policy towards Haiti. And we're going to get a bit of a better understanding of how this is really practically impacting people's lives, both historically and right now, today. It's very much a reality. So with all that in mind, I'm very, very pleased and excited to introduce you to Husoni Raymond from Black Lives Matter in Fredericton. He kindly agreed to co-host with me today, which is absolutely wonderful. He's a co-founder of the Black Lives Matter in Fredericton, and his advocacy is rooted in a passion for community empowerment and Black liberation. And during his time with Black Lives Matter Fredericton, he's led grassroots initiatives related to defunding the police, anti-oppression education. He's targeted financial aid for, or looking for targeted financial aid for Black students, and other things like incorporating Black history in the New Brunswick public school curriculum. So he's got his hands in a lot of pots, and so we're really privileged and honored and pleased to have him with us today. So welcome, Husoni.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Terry, and I am happy to be here today just to learn more from this incredible selection of panelists that we have here. As Terry said, my name is Husoni Raymond, and I'm an organizer with Black Lives Matter Fredericton here on the traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoq people. And, you know, Black Lives Matter Fredericton sees indigenous self-determination and Black liberation as interconnected issues. So we try to work closely with our grassroots indigenous community members to advance our collective goal of liberation of our peoples. I am originally from the Caribbean. I moved here a couple of years ago for university at St. Thomas University, but I was born and raised in Kingston, Jamaica. Lived there majority of my life for 19 years until I decided to move to Canada, which I knew no one had no friends or family. So that's an interesting story for me. But coming here and being confronted with anti-Black racism, that's what really got me into this kind of work. And the more liberation work you do is the more you realize that our struggles are interconnected in certain ways. So here at Black Lives Matter Fredericton, we're not just focused on the liberation of Black people in Fredericton or in New Brunswick, but the liberation of Black people across the world and their right to self-determination, because none of us will be free until all of us are free. And we tend to have these conversations within the context of the Canadian state or local cities, but we have to interrogate the ways in which the countries we're a part of also inflict violence on Black bodies outside of where we live. So I'm really excited to hear more from this awesome selection of panelists and hopefully having an engaging discussion on these topics. So I guess now I will do a brief introduction of the panelists that will be speaking with us today. So the first panelist is Gabrielle PAUL, and she is a graduate of École Supérieure Catholique de Detroit de Jérémie in Grand Anse, Haiti. Sorry for my French. Jamaica was colonized by the British, so I really have little French skills. Gabrielle is the founder and president of the foundation Julia et Jade, which works with women to reinforce their capacity to do for themselves and their communities, and farmers who produce organic beans, corns, etc. The foundation also runs the Haitian African Restoration World Academy, which aims to educate children in a way that is relevant to their experience and is rooted in Haitian history and culture. She is the co-host of a radio show called Generation Debut at the Extension FM in Jeremy. So we are really excited to have Gabrielle with us here today to hear her firsthand experiences and her expertise on this topic. The second panelist that will be joining us here today is Jafrikayiti, who is also known as Saint-Ville, and he's a graduate of Waterloo University with the honors in biology. He's an author, radio show host, public speaker, activist, artist, and Canadian civil servant. He's the co-founder of two self-help organizations, Akastan and Jafrikayiti, which followed the principles popularized by Marcus Garvey. He has been a thorn in the side of the Canadian government for many years, never giving up on the idea that Canada and the rest of the core group of influential foreign powers in Haiti could and should stop interfering in the governance of Haiti so that the Haitian people can build their own country on their own terms. You can find out more about him and his work at jafrikayiti.com. And last but not least, we have El Jones, who will be joining us here today. And El Jones is a spoken word poet, an educator, journalist, and community activist living in African Nova Scotia. She was the 5th Poet Laureate of Halifax. In 2016, Elle was the recipient of the Burnley Rocky Jones Human Rights Award for her community work and work in prison justice. She is a co-founder of the Black Power Hour, a live radio show with incarcerated people on CKDU that creates space for people inside to share their creative work and discuss contemporary social and political issues. And along with this work, she supports women in Nova Institution in writing and sharing their voices. Elle served as the 15th Nancy's Chair of Women's Studies at Mount St. Vincent University from 2017 to 2019 term. Her book of spoken word poetry, Live from the African Resistance, was published by Roseway Press in 2014. Elle writes a weekly column for the Halifax Examiner and was an Atlantic Journalism Award winner in 2018. Elle would like to pay tribute to the many nameless and unrecognized women whose work make it possible for her to be here today. So as you can tell from these bios, we have some really powerful speakers that will be joining us here that are involved in so many different projects aimed at the liberation of Black and racialized people. So we're really looking forward to hearing their thoughts. And I guess now we'd like to welcome Gabrielle to the stage to share her expertise with us.
Hi, everyone. I hope you hear me well. It's an honor for me to be with you today. So I decided not to give you some, information about statistic or what's going on, but I prefer to talk with my heart with you and to share with you a glimpse of our daily life as a people, as a human being. So it's a pleasure for me to be on the panel with people like Jafrika or Elle. So, and thank you for the organizer to invite me. Indeed, for about 10 years, Haiti descent into was precipitated as the international community decide to impose a puppet president upon the Haitian people. Joseph Michel Martelly, an ignoramus, a drug dealer. With the advent of Martelly's successor, Jovenel Moïse, whose mandate ended on February 7, 2021, we have now witnessed the complete collapse of our institutions: justice, parliament, the court of auditors, and now the police. All these institutions are concentrated in the hands of one man, Jovenel Moïse. Mr. Moïse, with the blessing of the international community, has taken our country hostage, and he is literally killing us every day. Under the Moïse administration, allied with BNU, the United Nations Integrated Office in Haiti, gangs have federated. Kidnapping and systematic looting of state property are commonplace. On July 6 and 7 and 8, 2018, the people expressed their dissatisfaction with the sharp rise of the price of gasoline. Since then, resistance to this repressive regime has only grown. Several reports of the Court of Auditors on the management of Petro-Caribbean Fund demonstrated clearly how Jovenel Moïse took part in the greatest financial theft that Haiti has ever known. Street demonstration to denounce Mr. Jovenel Moïse and his PHTK party intensified, using US mercenaries to thwart the popular revolt. The PHTK regime killed several demonstrators, many of them with a bullet to the head. Thanks to the vigilance of some members of the National Police, 7 US mercenaries got arrested, but they were never prosecuted. Instead, the American embassy in Port-au-Prince intervened, picked the mercenaries up, and they went home quietly. Several massacres happened in working class neighborhoods like La Saline, Bel Air, to name a few. Despite reports indexing members of the government in these massacres, no prosecution was initiated. The assassination of student Gregory Saint-Hilaire on the premises of the École Normale Supérieure by a presidential security agent speaks by itself about Mr. Moïse's desire to establish a dictatorship. The proliferation of gangs following their federation shows the state's willingness to terrorize the population to prevent them from demonstrating. And in fact, several neighborhoods are controlled by gangs, so the population cannot come out to demonstrate. Regarding the wave of kidnapping, the victim testimonies often mention that the perpetrators are dressed in police uniform and they use vehicles with official government license plates. The authorities remain silent about this disturbing fact. Ransom demanding by kidnappers vary between 100,000 to millions of US dollars. Corruption, massacres, assassination, federation of gangs. This is the achievement of this criminal PHTK government. Yet, the international community wants this government to organize so-called free democratic elections. Moïse himself declared that whenever the election do take place, no one will be able to take power away from them. Frankly, it's like asking Dracula to be the keeper of a blood bank. We are fighting for our survival. Like George's Floyd, we say we cannot breathe because of the knee of this dictatorship upon our necks. We cannot breathe because of the weight of the racism by the international community. Yes, we dare to be free. We challenge white supremacists. We demonstrated to the whole world that we reject the exploitation of human being on the basis of skin color. We did so long before the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was writing. We issued this declaration at the cost of our blood. We want the world to know that as much as the Canadian, the French, the Americans, we Haitian are Moon. I use Moon because Moon explain as I am Haitian better the human beings means. But if you want to translate Moon, it's human being. So we are Moon. What happened in Village de Dieu on March 12, 2021, where between 5 to 7 officers from the National Police were trapped in a poorly planned operation. So far, families have no corpse to be able to give them a funeral worthy of their sacrifice. Furthermore, on March 3, a police officer assigned to the National Palace from the USGPN unit went missing after he was shot by bandits. Since then, his family has been begging the Haitian state for support. Silence radio is the response they obtain from the state, which is supposed to protect us. You remember the time when we couldn't mourn our loved one or give them proper funeral? Yes, it was the time of the Duvalier dictatorship. As a mother, sister, aunt, friend, quite simply as a Moon, I shared the daily life of a proud people, a proud nation that slavery was unable to destroy, unable to break. Despite their own suffering, our ancestors found time to help liberate the United States, Greece, Cuba, Venezuela, to name but a few. We are people who believe in solidarity, love among people. Yes, I do mean love among people. Today, once again, we are fighting for our humanity, our freedom in the face of traitors to our nation, in the face of racism for the descent of the former settlers. Today, under the label of democracy, they continue the exploitation of men by men, plundering the wealth of people in developing countries, putting puppets in power, arming young people from disadvantaged neighborhoods to create chaos. I know that for them, Haiti is not the example to follow, but we, Haitians, we are the descent of these gods who gave their lives for us to have this land, but also for all human beings in bondage throughout the world. There is a silver lining here. There exists a nation of believers who are ready to die for their freedom. This is Haiti. Yes, we dare to be free and sovereign for ourselves and by ourselves. I have a 7 years old daughter. You know, the kind of conversation I have with her, it's kidnapping, because when you turn on the radio, the TV, it's all over the place. So we talk about kidnapping. I have to explain to her what is it. We discuss our struggle because I am also an activist. I take part in demonstrations. I co-host a radio show. I tell my daughter, if anything happens to me, she needs to take care of her little brother who is only 16 months old. I must explain to her that I am not selfish. If unfortunately something were to happen to me, they must know it is for them that I was fighting, so they might have a better environment, so they might fulfill themselves as Moon. She listens and she nods. Sometimes she reminds me about my own safety, suggests that I need a bodyguard because deep down she doesn't want to lose her mom. She's just a child, but the traitors and the international community are robbing her of her childhood. This is the reality of our children in Haiti. She kisses me every day. She tells me that she loves me and that I'm the best mom ever. Sometimes she goes to demonstration with me on the radio show too, so she can understand. Is this enough? I don't know, but I'm doing my best because our lives are only 24-hour renewal, renewable here. Despite everything, we will not give up. We will fight to the last drop of our blood for our immunity, for our dignity, and for our humanity. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those powerful words, Gabrielle. And I feel like a lot of that resonated with me, you know, as someone from the Caribbean and outside of, you know, the quote unquote developed world, growing up in that, like a lot of people don't recognize the global nature of anti-Black racism, and the attention tends to be focused on Black lives within Canada or the United States, and not on you know, the global liberation of Black people and the struggles that colonialism has left in a lot of the predominantly Black nations across the world, and that the core group of powerful countries like US and Canada continue to colonize. It's the same practice, but different tactics that they're using. So I definitely felt a strong connection and call to action, that innocent Black people are being killed, are being brutalized. And that matters to me, even if I'm not from that country, because as I said earlier, you know, all of our liberation are interconnected. So even if Black people here are free, and Black people somewhere else in the world are still facing the legacy of Western imperialism and colonization, then I'm not fully free, because there's a threat to my freedom somewhere else. So I think it's very important for us to realize that, and develop solidarity across borders for the liberation of all Black people, because Black lives outside of the US and Canada still matter. It's not just Black lives within these states that were the product of colonization. And I think you brought up the good point about the lack of accountability for powerful countries like Canada and the United States. They can go and invade and do what they want in other countries and face zero to no repercussions. So there really needs to be stronger kind of global accountability measures for these countries, so that predominantly Black countries have the right to self-determination and creating their own path. And I just wanted to also mention the role of Haiti in the fight against anti-Black racism globally. You know, the liberation efforts of Haiti has impacted the liberation of Black people across the globe. You know, fighting against slavery and colonialism, and being one of the first, you know, truly liberated Black countries, and how that impacted the abolition of slavery, or influence other Black people in other countries to also fight for their freedoms. So it's imperative of Black people and people around the world to also recognize the role and the great role that Haiti has played in combating global anti-Blackness, and support liberation efforts that you know, the colonial powers are still trying to impose today. So I thought that was an excellent remarks, and I learned so much. Thank you.
I'm not going to take up much space because Husoni just eloquently said so many things that I would like to open it up for some questions to. Oh, I just see Jafrikayiti has arrived, but I wanted to say to you, Gabrielle, thank you, and just to respond to you as a mother, that to hear about your daughter and your son and the very immediate reality of what this means for people like you every day. And so that's what touched me so much. Everything touched me about what you said, but that in particular, so fundamental. And those children are the ones, our children are the ones that, you know, all of us are kind of looking to the future and hoping things will be better. And people like me coming from North America and looking at our government and saying, shame, 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 and don't act in my name against our friends in places like Haiti. And we have to stand up together to say that. So thank you for your daily courage in what you do. Thank you. And I guess, Husoni, maybe we'll move on, and because we're going to open it up afterwards, Gabrielle, and there'll be opportunity for people to respond to you as well. So Jafrikayiti is in the room, I believe. Welcome. Hello, hello, welcome.
Hello, yes, thank you very much. I see there's a whole lot of people already connected, so that's great.
And we have introduced you, my dear. So I think we will. We just heard from Gabrielle. So we will pass the floor to you now for your portion.
Oh, did I arrive late? I thought I arrived on time early, actually.
That's okay. It's very easy with all these time differences and things for us to get that part. But you arrived, in a way, you actually arrived right on time. So it was exactly the moment that you were supposed to speak. So
Wow, I apologize. I really thought that, okay, then let me move quickly then to the presentation. Are you able to see my shared?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay, so then I'll start with the first slide then and quickly get into it. Essentially, I have 4 moments in this presentation where I want to make the point that the people in Haiti are Africans, and we will talk about how they ended up in the Americas, and speak a bit about what the history has been since the arrival of the first Africans in Haiti, and shortly about the current situation. To me, it's always important not to start the story of any peoples in the Americas with the arrivals of the first genociders. So the Africans were leading free and prosperous lives on their continent until they were attacked. Today, people are talking about gender equality. Well, on our continent, we had people like Quintier, who ruled alongside her husband, or Queen Hatshepsut, who was the pharaoh. You can go to Egypt today and you will see in the land of the blacks, in Kemet, the evidence of civilization, where Africans, when we were free, we used to imagine our creator looking like ourselves, which is not the case today. So if you look at these depictions of Osiris, even in the Vatican itself, the brothers look like me. In fact, So what happened? Well, the church started with Pope Nicholas V decreeing with the papal bull that the Europeans can go and enslave Africans. And so they did, starting with Queen Elizabeth I. I smile when I hear people talk about whether there is racism at Buckingham Palace today. So the only Jesus that our ancestors ever met in real was a slave ship, and it was the property of Elizabeth and John Hawkins, and they kidnapped hundreds of Africans, and that's part of the accumulation of wealth of that family of millionaires in England. You can see all kinds of slides that tell you the story of how the Africans ended up in Haiti. And so I'll summarize the history to say essentially that Haiti is an international crime scene. Not just the genocide of the 1.5 million Taino or Arawak people who were there when Columbus arrived in 1492, but also the kidnapped, displaced, enslaved Africans who struggled for over 300 years until the revolution was successful. And as our Haitian historian Larac says, we have the first liberation theologian, Boukman, an enslaved African who was primarily enslaved in Jamaica and then ended up in Haiti, who said to get rid of the images of the white God who thirsts for tears, listen to freedom speaking from all our hearts. That's the launch of the Haitian Revolution in 1791, which was victorious over the armies of not just France, but of Spain, Britain, and France. That there were 55,000 British soldiers who died trying to enslave Africans on the island of Haiti. But that victory did not last long. The Haitian Revolution lasted 2 years, its success. And the cry of the founder of Haiti, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, is the same cry that you hear in the streets of Port-au-Prince today. Those whose fathers were in Africa on January 1st, 1804, shall they have nothing. Because as soon as the country was liberated, despite all of the efforts, the precautions taken by Jean-Jacques Dessalines and his august wife, the Impératrice Claire-Heureuse, to say this land has conducted a revolution to undo the crimes of Christian Europe, which on the basis of Leviticus 25 verses 44 to 42 to 46 tells the favorite children of God that it's okay, it's actually recommended for them to enslave their neighbors. Dessalines said, no, we have a different idea. The idea is tout moun c'est moun. And so Article 2 of the first Haitian Constitution says that slavery is forever abolished. However, he insisted that we don't recreate what the Europeans did. And in fact, he welcomed few Europeans who were left after the revolution on the island, including Polish, who had no territory of their own because Napoleon Bonaparte had taken over Poland. And so the Polish soldiers who came to enslave Africans found a nation in Haiti, and they were given Haitian citizenship. And of course, they were treated like every other Haitian. And so Dessalines said, we are not going to create a Black supremacy republic, but there are certain things that need to be understood. And so Article 14 of the Constitution says that there shall no longer be this madness of identifying some of us as mulatto, which means half of a white person or half human, or quarteron, which is 3/4 human. He said, that's all bullshit. From now on, all Haitians, including the Germans that he just offered Haitian citizenship to, the Americans and the Polish, all Haitians from now on will be considered blacks. And so black was considered a point of honor, a title that needs to be deserved. And so you see the rest of the slide. What I really wish you to remember is gunboat diplomacy, because not only was Haiti ostracized from birth, because it was a whole bunch of white supremacist states all around Haiti practicing racial slavery, but the attacks that took place were not conducted in isolation. So for instance, when France demanded restitution from Haiti, that Haiti pays for the loss of property, that is my great-grandfathers and grandmothers, they did it in collaboration with the Americans, in collaboration with the Dutch and other European powers who absolutely wanted to make sure that the Africans who've liberated themselves simmer in poverty for as long as possible. Very quickly, I'll talk about the latter part of Haitian history, but this slide is something that you could refer to look at some of the details. And so the restitution demand that Haitians talk about is about this, the equivalent of $40 billion that the French state collected as a ransom from the liberated Africans from 1825 to 1947, during the time of the Industrial Revolution, when everybody was building their infrastructures. Haiti was feeding the French state. And so the US invaded, the cousins, and the French had written to their cousin, the Americans, in 1805, saying that the existence of the Negro people in arms is a terrible threat for all white nations. These are the terms that they used at the time. And so the US put an embargo on Haiti, so the Africans could not trade, etc. But eventually the Americans invaded Haiti. And you know, white supremacy has a very special kind of humor. So what they did is that they imposed a string of mulatto dictators on Haiti. So all Haitian presidents during the US occupation looked like this fool there, Sieur d'Artignave. But on top of that, they created an army, the armed forces of Haiti. These are the pictures of the generals and lieutenants in the Haitian armed forces. Of course, they're all Americans. They're all white men, and the next level were all mulattoes, and the street soldiers were blacks. And that's the model that they wanted to implement, and they want to implement to this day in Haiti, as you will see in the next few slides. The point is, Africans have always been seen as a threat in the Americas, not as assets. And when you have a former Canadian minister for la francophonie, Denis Paradis, who convened this meeting to plot the overthrow of Haiti's democratically elected president, this meeting took place right here where I am. Perhaps that's why I talk about it with so much passion, that a bunch of white men and women met and they decided. And you see the quote here from Denis Paradis. He says, time is running out because it is estimated that Haiti's population could reach 20 million in 2019. It is a time bomb which must be stopped immediately. When they refer to Black people as a time bomb that needs to be stopped immediately, you don't need to be schizophrenic or paranoia to understand that this is barbaric language. Because what happens is that these foolish people who were meeting at Meech Lake had the means to do what they were dreaming of. And so 13 months later, white soldiers entered the residence of the president, kidnapped him and his wife, and took him to the Central African Republic. And this is not something that I'm just reading in books, because I went to Haiti for the bicentennial, and on December 31st, 2003, I was in one of the big hotels of Pétionville in the lobby facing this man and Canadian envoy to the OAS, David Lee, who was with him. They looked drunk, but that's no excuse. Luigi Einaudi said the real problem with Haiti is that the international community is so screwed up and divided that they are letting Haitians run Haiti. We asked him to repeat it, and he did. Of course, when we returned to Canada, we published all kinds of stuff, and the media refused to print that quote on account that there's a word screwed up there that's not kosher. Well, we said, you know, I cannot fix his words for him. That's what he said. And so President Aristide demanded that France returns the restitution money. And so he was kidnapped. The United Nations troops invaded Haiti in June to consolidate the coup because they knew this was a popular president. Therefore, they needed to have a force on the ground to placate the communities. If you look at the pictures of the leaders of the coup, these are all so-called Haitian businessmen. Almost none of them here are Haitian. Some of them are the consulate, the representative of foreign states. Gilbert Bijot, who is supposed to be the richest man on the island, is also the representative of Israel in Haiti. André Apped, whose name you'll hear again. All of these guys, they put the money together to organize the coup against President Aristide and the Haitian people. 7,000 elected officials were toppled. I put this picture here simply to show the difference between when the Haitian people choose a president and when the white supremacist forces choose a president for us. The fool you see on the left here is Michel Martelly. That's his stage action. You know, I know Donald Trump was popular because of this phrase, you know, grab them by, well, this guy, he was grabbing himself on stage all the time. That was how he is known. And Hillary Clinton intervened in the Haitian elections and demanded that this man be placed in the second round, and lo and behold, he becomes president. Now, on the other hand, on the right, you will see this young lady who graduated last year from Université Fondation Aristide, the university established by the president, who was kidnapped and sent to exile in Africa. When he returned in 2011, which is exactly 10 years ago, he said that he was going to invest in education. And this is exactly what he did. Just a couple of last slides. So what they are doing right now is establish a model of Rhodesia in Haiti. This same guy, André Apped, who you see here, who created the Group of 184 to conduct the coup in 2004, Jovenel Moïse, the fake blackface puppet president that he put in place, one day after his term expired, as our sister Gabi mentioned, well, he gave this whole territory there in red to André Apped. The term Apedixtan is my own colorful language to say that this is the land of Apped in the territory of Haiti. Basically, they give him this whole territory to do a monoculture, something called sepia for Coca-Cola. And so all of the leaders with Michel Martelly, you can see they were all light-skinned. And so these guys started to be nervous and say that, well, the Haitian population might revolt against Michel Martelly because he has all these light-skinned Haitians around him. Let's go and find a dark Haitian and make him president. And this is what they did with this guy there, Jovenel Moïse. But Haitians are not foolish. They understand that Jovenel Moïse is what we call in Haiti a sans maman, that is a motherless person. But he has many fathers. And all of the fathers of Jovenel Moïse are white. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jafrikayiti. You really touched on a lot of important points and you know, explain basically modern day attempts of continued colonization in Haiti, and the resistance and strength of the Haitian people that really inspires Black liberation efforts globally. And I can't wait to engage with you more in the later sessions, but now we will welcome El Jones to give her presentation. Then we'll come back with some comments and questions later.
Hello, everybody. Sorry, I was like receiving a call from jail just as we were finishing up. Thank you so much. That was very informative. Thank you. I'm actually joining us today from the middle of the Abolition Coalition National Day of Action, Free Them All on prisons. And I want to draw some connections between that action and what we're here to do today. So today we have been protesting and in making demands because it has been a year since the first case of COVID appeared in Canadian prisons. And of course, in that time, the federal government has not released any federal prisoners. And we have seen the conditions in our federal prisons, which are never safe and never healthy and never good, have worsened even more. So what we've seen, rather than releasing people into community, is creating more lockdown conditions, securitizing the jail, people not being able to get even phone calls out to their lawyers, people not being able to get showers. Of course, all the visiting has been cut, all the programs have been cut. And so we have seen a deteriorating of conditions that are already inhumane conditions. And today we have been outside many different facilities, government facilities, jails and prisons across this country in order, sorry, my watch is talking to me, in order to protest these conditions. And one of the things, of course, as we have been in the process of talking about this today, is many people have drawn the connections between the carceral state and obviously settler colonialism in Canada. The incarceration of Indigenous people, where now 44% of federal prisoners who are women are Indigenous women. 30% of dangerous offenders that are designated are Indigenous people, most of whom have not committed the kind of crimes that white men need to commit, such as being serial killers, but are often just people with histories of trauma. We know, of course, that Indigenous people continue to suffer the effects of residential schools and generational trauma, and that has been converted now into the new residential schools, which is the prison system. And so, of course, as we speak about colonization, we have also spoken about the borders in Canada, and Solidarity Across Borders has been outside the Laval Detention Center protesting, of course, immigration detention in this country. And many people remember that are outraged with Trump putting kids in cages and do not know that Canada puts kids in cages. There are at least 118 children that are held in immigration custody in Canada, separate from their parents or with their parents, but still inside detention. And immigration detention does not mean some kind of shelter. People often imagine it as perhaps a dormitory. It is in fact a jail. You are simply in prison. And so we connect the policing of our borders to incarceration and to policing more generally. We understand that policing is not simply an act that takes place on the streets, what we're most familiar with, police profiling or being stopped, but we understand that policing makes its way, carcerality makes its way through all elements of our society. So not only being street checked or beaten up by the police or killed by the police, not only inside a prison and not only being placed in the prison, but then the kind of violence that takes place inside prisons up to and including death, which we are seeing right now with people overdosing inside prisons and COVID deaths. Also at our borders and the policing of the notion of Canada as a nation inside forensics hospitals, and then through things like child welfare and the healthcare system, which can also be carceral. And I say all of this as a warm up to say that we also cannot extract from this the notion of Canada's imperial histories as well. And so we very much connect Canada's imperial history in places like Haiti to Canada's imperial history within our borders and our settler colonial history. So when I talk about Laval, for example, the immigration detention center, though we do not keep numbers in Canada, anecdotally, we know that the vast majority of people who are incarcerated in immigration detention are Jamaicans, Somalis, Nigerians, and of course, Haitian people who, as has been reviewed in the previous speech, are determined to be threats, are always determined to be some special form of danger. And we have persistently seen violence against Haitian people, not only in the United States, but also in Canada as well. We also got a review in the previous talk of Canada's role in the coup in 2004, where Canada, without consulting any Haitian leaders, sat down with European nations, with American and decided that it was their job to remove a democratically elected leader, Aristide. And from that point on, there have been no democratic elections allowed in Haiti because they have not allowed candidates that are not approved to run. So today we see Haitian people taking to the streets. We often believe, of course, that all revolution comes from the global north. We will point to things like the Black Lives Matter movement with its origins in the United States and forget that people across the global south sorry, I'm choking because I've been talking for like 3 hours. People across the global south have been on the move in Bolivia, which we've seen repression, marching through Santiago, marching through Haiti, not just now, but for many months. So the first thing I do want to recollect us to is the Black Lives Matter movement, though named in America, simply does not belong to America. And certainly the notion of Black revolution and liberation does not belong in the United States as well. And we make a mistake when we only turn our eyes to what is happening south of the border, and we do not remember the many Black liberation movements throughout history and today that are taking place across this globe, including in Haiti. I also want to connect us to the fact that Haitian workers, who are a huge part of this movement and this revolution resistance taking place in Haiti right now, we also see that kind of movement in, for example, Black workers in Alabama, who are right now trying to unionize against Amazon. And that movement that has been led by workers being denied PPE, by workers who are being paid minimum wage, while Amazon's profits go higher and higher and higher. We recognize that this is a global Black worker movement as well. And so solidarity with the workers at Amazon, solidarity with Black workers across our communities also means solidarity of the workers in Haiti. I also, of course, want to draw attention to the connections of police violence and self-determination and sovereignty. And we got a very great history in all the speakers from Haiti's role in Black revolution, which the Black people across the globe will never forget, that Haiti's successful slave revolution set the tone for freedom. And though it was never acknowledged, it could not be spoken of by so many European philosophers, its reverberations terrified Europe. We perhaps see its reverberations, for example, in Frankenstein, where the figure of the monster very much can be tied to the fear of the oppressed person rising up and killing its master. And that book is written in the context post-Haitian Revolution. And though, of course, Blackness is always exited from our understanding of world history, our idea that Black people were present, we know that Haiti sent reverberations through the European mind who could not believe that Africans understood freedom and that Africans could be capable of freedom. Hegel, the famous philosopher in the philosophy of history, who it will then go on to influence Marx, for example, Hegel says that there is no such thing as freedom in Africa. Let us pass over Africa. Africans do not understand freedom. And he wrote that during the Haitian Revolution while Africans were conducting a successful revolution. So we often learn, of course, about the American Revolution, the French Revolution. And if we hear about Haiti, the idea is that France set the stage and Africans followed. And we do not understand, of course, as we heard again, that Haitians set the first constitution that universally declared liberation and suffrage. It was Haitians who were the first people to declare all men, women, and children to be sovereign and to be citizens and to declare Blackness as a universal human state. So we have to understand that in our fight now for liberation, in our movements, in our communities. We cannot understand the movements we are undertaking against policing and against prisons without understanding this long history of what rebellion and revolution has meant for us as Black people and why it has been so suppressed. We can think back to the earthquake in 2010 in Haiti, when we heard repeatedly, Haiti is the poorest country in the Northern Hemisphere. Haiti is the poorest country in the Northern Hemisphere. And nobody talked about why Haiti had been stripped of its resources, that after the Haitian Revolution, Haiti had to pay indemnities to France for the privilege of having freed themselves from slavery. And 80% of Haiti's GDP until 1947 was sent out to France, and yet we cannot get reparations today. So when they tell us that reparations are impossible, that we cannot defund the police because they can't possibly put resources into our community, we understand that in the same continuum as the people that told us that if you get freedom, you will pay for it forever. You will pay for it with your lives, and then you will pay for it over and over and over and over in your standard and quality of living for generations, which they then turn around and blame on some kind of pathology or corruption that they believe, lives at the root of us. And so when we today undertake conversations about reparations, which is part of the conversation around defunding police, because defunding is not simply about taking money from the police, it's more broadly about a conversation about what do our countries value and what do we resource. And we have the money. to take people out of prisons and put them into community if we would spend that money on housing, if we would spend that money on treatment, if we would spend that money on food and mental health. That is part of the same conversation of understanding the resources that are being stripped from generation to generation to generation from our countries and the places we are from. So we must draw that connection. I also want to draw the connection, of course, to Canada's violent imperialism. We often put this off onto the United States. So we understand that the US is a violent imperial nation, but we are not just the junior partners, to use Ronaldo Walcott's phrase. We are active participants in imperialism around the world, including in Haiti. We played a key role in the coup against Haiti. We continue to fund Haitian corruption that we then blame on Haitian people. And of course, Jafrikayiti, you had a great tweet about this, that imagine if the Hells Angels and like Karla Homolka were buying property in Canada funded by Ethiopia, Sudan, we would be outraged. Yet this is a normal state that Canada continues through our banking system, through our economy, to support the very conditions in Haiti that lead to the oppression of people. So at the same time as we hold ourselves up around the world as peacekeepers, as bringers of freedom and liberation, and Canada is a nice, polite country, we actually know that Canada is engaged both behind the scenes and in open in incredibly violent actions. And so as Canadians, we do not get to turn our heads from what is happening in Haiti and pretend it does not involve us and it's something just happening over there. We are part of this, our economy, our banking system. Royal Bank has been heavily leveraged into Haiti. We have a long history of this. So to bring this to the current day and our current liberation battle, as I said, I do not think that we can understand our current movement against policing without understanding movements in the global South. So when we think about the police torture and killings that take place here and the worth of Black bodies that is non-existent in our society, we understand that that is projected onto the ways that we never believe African people can run their own affairs or that African people are capable of liberation and freedom. That is the same psychology that turns on us and says that we need to be contained and disciplined in police, whether that is on the streets as we're walking, just trying to live our lives, whether that's inside our schools as our children are suspended and have cops in schools beating them up and brutalizing them, whether it is at our borders where Canada presents to the world a benevolent face, a face of welcoming, and in fact, brutally polices our borders. We barely let anybody in. We're about 200th in the world, yet we believe that we take in so many refugees and migrants. And then, of course, subject those who do come through our borders to things like immigration detention. And there is a reason why the largely Black migrants inside Laval detention facility today are on a hunger strike and have been striking for nearly a year to protest their conditions when they committed no crime but moving their body from place to place. Something that companies like Amazon, to return to that, are not only willing to do or able to do, but are welcome to. The red carpet is rolled out when capital wants to cross a border, right? When Amazon flirted with saying, oh, we will come to any city, and we saw all our mayors compete over who might get an Amazon plant so they don't have to pay taxes. So we build roads for them. So we make sure that everything is open to them so that capital can move internationally. Yet if someone wants to come here to pick fruit or to be a nanny or to simply live their life, we tell that body, particularly a Black body, that to cross that border is an illegal act and that you can be placed in jail for no other crime than simply seeking economic well-being and a better life for your family. So we connect that anti-Blackness that is violent in Canada to our particular focus in immigration policy on African peoples, and Haitians are, of course, African peoples. So as we talk about Black Lives Matter, we understand that we must take a global perspective. We must take an anti-war perspective, something that the left has not been taking account for, that in our leftist politics, we have forgotten the movement for peace. And we have acceded ourselves to a bourgeois form of identity politics that thinks that our main concern is what is happening in our boardrooms or our governing rooms of universities. And I'm not saying those things do not matter, but I'm saying that when our politics becomes focused on what Black people are sitting in the cabinet and celebrating them and not focused on what the working people, African people around the globe are struggling with, we have gone in the wrong direction. So our solidarities must be with the working African people across this globe. And that includes taking an anti-war perspective. It means we must defund the military. And we understand that military weaponry makes its way to our police. We understand that our police train in the United States, the same United States that violently occupies so many American countries around this world as we do through things like AFRICOM and our military engagement as well. We understand our mining companies, by the way, are also incredibly violent and have done violence across this globe to indigenous and African people. We kill people. We killed 42 people in Tanzania through our mining interests. The same mining interests, by the way, that fund Wes Hall, who founded Black North Initiative, which is a neoliberal initiative. And this is what we are, so this is supposed to get more Black people in boardrooms. And this is what we pay attention to, that somebody with dirty, bloody money from mining takeovers and mining boards, and I'm sorry if this sounds direct, but nobody has asked these questions. And then we hold that up as something that comes out of Black Lives Matter, as though that is not also invested in Black death. And we say no to that kind of neoliberal treachery on the working people. What we say yes to is solidarity with African people, solidarity with workers, yes to peace, yes to defunding the police and taking resources and putting in our communities, yes to working people having a living wage, no to imperialism, no to war, and no to Canada's involvement in these bloody coups around the world that we continue to engage in and then wash our hands clean. So Black lives do not matter in Canada if they do not matter in Haiti, if they do not matter across the continent, if they do not matter across the Caribbean. And finally, there will be no justice for Black people in Canada, so-called Canada, without reparations for the long, long history of extracting our labor and extracting violently from us from generation to generation. So I will stop there. And I don't know if there's questions, because I guess I've said enough.
Wow. I don't want to take much of the floor after Elle's wonderful sharing there with us. I really want to give both of our other speakers first just a brief chance to respond to some of the stuff that Elle said, and then we'll just open it up to the floor to everybody.
And I do have to return in about 5 minutes back to Abolition Coalition. We are in the middle. I'm actually hosting the event. So we are in the middle of a day of action. So I'll give 5-10 minutes. And then I do want to leave Desmond not stranded by himself on that broadcast. But I can stay about 10 more minutes if that's all right.
Okay, then maybe, and Husoni, what you can add your thoughts here, but maybe our best thing then is to, if we could open it up, Jafrikayiti and Gabrielle to say a couple of words, and then just if there are any questions for Elle before she leaves, and any thoughts about actions, Elle, that any of us could be taking right now. And some of that you could tell us afterwards if you don't have time today, because we are going to be communicating with people that have registered for this event and showing them ways that they can take action afterwards. So any guidelines there would be helpful.
Wow. Well, since I arrived late, I don't want to waste any second, and I want to take the maximum opportunity here because, you know, I'll say something that looks corny and weird, but I want to thank COVID, because if it wasn't for COVID, I don't think I would have made all of these meetings in the past year. You know, like, how come I never knew Elle before? Thank you so much for organizing this. And my question is about that, Elle. As you can see, you know, you in this event, you're doing another one. Gabby is, I'm sure she postponed a number of other engagements in order to be here. So we need arms, we need people, we need voices, we need to multiply naturally. How would you suggest that we work to help more and more Canadians? Because we've seen the generosity of Canadian people. After the earthquake, we saw it. Even after the coup, by doing presentations, I was invited at Cape Breton University and other places. So when people know, they get involved and they say, not in our name, let's try to make this change. How do you suggest we go about doing it, especially with the universities, so that students don't get distracted with representation policies, you know, like we have a Black governor general, we have Black this, Black that, and these people are completely silent about what's really happening to our lives. What do you suggest that we do to awake some of our sleeping brothers and sisters of all races?
I guess I'll take that. I think, yes, we have to understand what the role. So there's a difference between identity politics, as in us claiming our Blackness and understanding our histories of Blackness, and that Black people as property underlies capitalism. So when I talk about identity politics, I do not mean it in the way the right wing means it when they mean stop talking about race. But there is a form of identity politics that we're seeing cynically exploited, most obviously in the Biden administration, who is, of course, cheerleading and supporting this coup, essentially, in Haiti, this complete violation of democratic rights, while, for example, holding up Kamala Harris as a Black vice president, while giving us the backgrounds of every single person in cabinet. I have a poem about this, A Woman's Going to Send the Bombs, where I literally sarcastically talk about, you know, how amazing it is supposed to be. Like, this is feminist now, like, oh, we're bombing countries, but it's a Black woman doing it, so slay, queen, like, quite literally. So I do have a poem on that topic. Perhaps I can read it before I duck out. But and that is something that we need to give education to our young people on. I think we've seen this summer that young people can be radicalized and are radicalized. We've had a huge influx into the abolition movement, for example, of young people interested in policing and prisons, and young people that have been incredibly politically active in communities and really been on the streets. But one thing that I think we've fallen down on is connecting that to international policy. And as I said, connecting that to the long Black radical tradition of peace work. That we have not made the connections for. So I don't think it's that young people are in any way deficient in their politics or in their passion or in their analysis, but we as elders, whatever that means, we have a responsibility to train our younger people in these movement principles, because one of the things that happens is that there is a deliberate neoliberal plot, if I can put it that way, to teach younger people that, oh, no, your politics is on Twitter, it's in the hashtag, it's in representation, it's in these things. And what you don't, a 15-year-old can't know any better unless somebody teaches them. So it is our job to make sure they have access to the reading and the political reading, to the many generations of Black people that have come before, people like Frantz Fanon, people like Cabral, people like Biko, you know, that is not reading, that is beyond them. And we know our greatest geniuses throughout history have laid down a path. We know that the state does all it can to erase our knowledge of movements and to always teach us that nothing happened before. So we need to fight amnesia, which is part of white supremacy. White supremacy always claims innocence and always induces amnesia. So it wasn't us, I don't know, we can't know any better, and it never happened. And so I think it is our job to intervene in that. And we know we can do that. We did it all summer. So we just need to continue mentoring young people, creating spaces where we can share information and knowledge, creating new ways, and letting young people create, because we know that they are the commanders right now of social media. Young people out there on TikTok, there's no reason why you can't see people making TikToks about Canada's foreign policy. They do it, and they can do it. So I think it's our responsibility, especially those of us that identify as leftists, to really rejuvenate the Black left, and to ourselves really fight this notion that, yeah, our project now is to just get more Black faces in high places. We need to show a different path. So that would be my answer. Sorry for that being long.
And Gabrielle, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or ideas you want to share based on what you've heard.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's like when I heard Elle, you're amazing. Thank you. A lot of energy. And well, I think, you know, like what's going on in Haiti, so many 2 years ago and until today, we got a lot of youth leaving the country because they try to, like you said, Elle, because they want to have a better life. And we went to Chile, you know, what's going on in Brazil, the situation of Haitian people when they try to cross the border in Peru. So the way they are treating, and you just realize it's like, we want to stay home. I'm trying to build my life here. I don't want to go anywhere. I travel. I went to USA. One time I went to Canada, but I just want to stay home. But the way the international community involved in our politics, our life, make us leave. And so, and when they said we are illegal, it hurts because we don't want to be illegal. We don't want to go to people to take people's jobs, and you know, we want to stay home. But when I can't provide for my daughter, even I work hard, when I can't be able as a mother to make sure she will be in safety when she goes to school, so what you want me to do? If I know somewhere else to do that, I will leave. And that's what we want to the people to understand. We don't want to live because we have fun, we got fun. No, we live because we are dying here. And that's the reality. We are dying. Our children, they are killing our children. And yesterday I was listening at a radio, and I explained to that to Jaffrey. I was listening to that mother. I am a mother. My older, she is 7 years old, and my son, he is 16 months old. And last year they killed a mother with her child. She was 4 months. The bandit with a bullet gun, you know. And I was listening to her at the radio, and she was said, I will kill myself if I don't got my son body. He was a police officer killed last week. And it's nine days without anything. They don't know, no support, nothing. And still Canada, USA, France, they still want their so-called democracy here. And they don't see us as and that's what I understand. They don't see us as a human. They don't see us as a human, because if you see us as a human, and that's the reason I prefer to say moon, because for me, moon as a Haitian, it's mean a lot. So if they see us as a moon, they will understand that government can do anything else for us. They stealing our money, they stealing our lives. And as a human, as a mother, as a sister. So when I try to explain that to my 7 years old girl, I don't, I'm like, okay, she doesn't, we don't have a life, my life, it's like a conference like this, 3 to 4 a day, demonstration in the street. Yesterday I was in the street to fight for those police officers. And tomorrow I will be on the radio. Monday, that's my life. Monday I will be on the street again. I'm 39 years old. So I would like to organize myself to spend time with my children, with my friends. But I don't get that. I don't go to movie theater. I don't have any fun. All my life it's this, because I'm fighting for my dignity. I want to the world to understand we are human in Haiti. And when we realized, and when I heard last week that guys in the Congress said they invest a lot in Haiti, it's like they are making us, charity. We don't want their charity. We have enough to live on ourselves, but they just don't want us to live like this. And they create that chaos. And when we go to their country, they are mad. I'm sorry. We still continue to do so until they understand they have to leave us alone. If they want to build something with us, they are welcome. But if they want to continue to destroy our lives, we will fight. And when I said fight, it's fight. I'm ready to do anything to protect my children.
Wow. I do have to get going. I don't want to, but is there anything else before I leave? I don't want to leave. Gabby, that was so powerful. Like just those words, which remind me of Harriet Tubman as well, right? We will have freedom or we will die, the echoing cry of Black radicalism across the centuries. But before I leave, is there anything that people wanted before I go?
I want to say thank you, Elle, just on behalf of all of us, for coming and just sharing your time with us today. It's a real privilege to have you here, a real honor, because we know you're busy and all the important work you're doing. So thank you so much.
And I'm sorry to run on this. I really wish I could stay. I just am very mindful that Desmond Cole is holding down a live stream with about 5 different interviews and 3 different events going on. So I don't want to leave him. If people after this event want to join, you can go to Toronto Prisoners' Rights Project Facebook and watch the live stream as we continue. We'll be there until like 5 p.m. So thank you. Much love to everybody. Solidarity. Thank you, Hassoni. Thank you, Terry. And of course, the speakers. I love you all. Solidarity with everybody. Much peace.
Love you, Elle. Bye-bye.
Love you all. Thanks.
Aye, Bobo.
That was such a powerful presentation from all the speakers, and I really loved how Elle really tied it in, and it really connected throughout all three speakers the need for a global solidarity against anti-Black racism and the ways in which Black people are exploited here in Canada and the United States also reflect the ways in which Black people in the global South are also exploited, and that, you know, all Black lives matter, and we can't just focus on Black lives within the global North or be satisfied with representational politics and forget the exploitation of Black people globally. You know, Elle talked about corporations like Amazon and how they continue to exploit Black people in developing countries, and how, you know, even current days, the way in which colonization operates, and you know, businesses and the government still exploit the resources of countries and then look at them and think they're poor and deserving of little or no financial aid, when in fact these countries are rich with resources, but they're still being exploited and exported to the quote unquote developed world, but then which make our countries unlivable. And then when people try to migrate for a better lives for their families, they're seen as pests. You know, like, who wants to leave a tropical island, when you really think of it, to come and to somewhere where it gets to minus 30 degrees, you know? The reason for that is because of colonization and the current days and the current ways in which colonization manifests itself in our countries that make it unlivable, to force people to try and seek a better life. So if you don't want Black people in your country, stop exploiting the developed world. And I really just wanted to tie that in and ask, you know, Gabby and Jafrikayiti, how people can support, you know, how people in Canada, because I recognize and I understand the way in which we live in a bubble, and we can think that, you know, if Black lives are mattering in Canada, it's okay for them to be exploited in other parts of the world, and how we're actually complicit, even Black people ourselves, in the global North, sometimes are complicit in the exploitation of Black people across the world. And we must recognize that, and recognize that a fight for Black Lives to Matter here in Canada and the United States must also be for Black Lives to Matter and Black liberation and self-determination across the world. So I wanted to ask, how can people living in Canada and across the world, what can they do to support the efforts for liberation in Haiti?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll jump in to say that, you know, there are examples. Monday, we have one of our MPs, Mario Beaulieu, who's going to table a petition on Parliament Hill during the question period. And it started as an effort from Solidarité Québec Haiti activists who said that they want the full release of the Ottawa Initiative on Haiti documents. Because what you get right now when you do access to information request on that is a whole bunch of blackened pages. You cannot read anything. Whereas these guys said they met to discuss how they're going to help Haiti. Well, then it should be visible what you were talking about. And as citizens, it doesn't matter how long it takes, we want to know what was done with our tax money. And so some Canadians are doing that. The other point I'll make is that contrary to this paranoia with which some people approach Haiti, and indeed the Black world, people in Haiti are not plotting revenge. And you know, I mean, we're dealing with some of the most educated populations in the world, yet you say reparations to them and they hear revenge. Like, what is it is so difficult to understand? The word says what it is, reparations. I mean, it means you've broken something, you need to repair it, period. And whether it is in Haiti, whether it is in South Africa, African people never went for revenge. Whether it is in Zimbabwe, it just never happened. After Katrina, what did they do? They went with their armies and bulldozed people, and people in New Orleans lost their land because their own army was shooting at them. Well, do you know the same thing happened after the earthquake in Haiti? When people were under rubble, we in the African Canadian community, we were begging the Canadian government to send the specialized search and rescue team. That's not what they did. They didn't send it. Many Canadians didn't even realize that this wasn't done, because the propaganda machine was such that they gave the impression that they were considering it, and then they canceled it, but people kept in mind that it was being done. But instead, what we did was send 2,000 soldiers to add to the 10,000 the Americans sent, because the whole thing was that, and some of the documents that people got access to later on proved it, their fear was that there was going to be an uprising in Haiti while the earthquake just happened. People are under rubble. They're looking for food. They're looking for water. They're looking for medicine. And they got it from Cuba. The Cuban doctors saved a whole lot of lives. Why? And I think the point I'm trying to make here is that the situation is not hopeless. Okay, Canada is one of the richest countries on the planet. We have lots of territory. We have resources like mightily. Our universities are some of the best in the world. Instead of having this foolish idea that we're going to play, little brother to the Americans. So when they go and they try to invade Bolivia so they can steal the lithium of Bolivia, we're going to tag along with our army. That's stupid. We don't need to do that. Canadians can do something better. Okay? We can use science and technology to help some of these nations that did not get an opportunity to build their infrastructure so they can build their infrastructure. But it has to be done on their own terms. So for instance, Haitians are not against mining. We're not against mining. Okay? We would like to exploit our gold, but not under any type of condition. Just like the First Nations people in Nunavut, okay, they're not against mining, but they don't want you to come and just dig and take and leave. Okay, especially if you're going to take it without doing any environmental assessment, you're not doing any remediation, you just leave them in a land that cannot do anything for them, which is what they're doing in the Congo, which is what they're doing in Guatemala. What we're saying is that this idea of propping up puppet governments, corrupt puppet governments, so that our mining companies can have an advantage in those territories, this is neo-colonialism, and this is barbaric. As Canadians, we should stand against it. And that's why I really appreciate Elle's focus on peace, okay? We need a peace movement. In this city where I live, we have a museum of war. I really would like to see us build a museum of peace and to be really serious about it, because peace is not just a passive thing. It's something that you fight for. You need to deserve peace. And right now, all we're getting is a whole bunch of people making us scared of foreigners instead of embracing our planet and making sure that these people who are running away from a Caribbean paradise with 33 degrees, 365 days a year, I mean, we're not coming here to skate on the Rideau Canal. I can tell you that. That's not why we Haitians come here, okay? We come here because the university, the one president we had who was investing in education, was kidnapped in our country. And when he returned, just between 2011 and today, 747 young people graduated, doctors, lawyers, engineers. So you kidnap our scientists and you put, the equivalent of your Carla Homolka and Paul Bernardo as our leaders. And then when all hell breaks loose, you pretend not to understand what you did. Nah, this is not something that happened because Black people are confused and they cannot lead themselves. It's because there was a conspiracy, and we're not conspiracy theorists. And for people who accuse us of conspiracy theories, I always answer the same way. I don't mind. I will stop theorizing as long as you stop conspiring. It's an easy deal to have.
So I just want to add on what Jafrika said about the question, what we can do as a Canadian, and I'm sure yes. So it's like you need to get involved with organization, knowing what's going on the ground, because you know you need, if you just continue to listen what they are saying at the in the radio and television, you're not gonna know the truth, because all are part of those people who want to destroy us, because they are not telling the truth about what's going on in Haiti. And so if you get a chance to be part of some grassroots organization, so you will learn to know us better. We're not, we, like always they said, we are lazy, we don't want to, we don't love each other, we want to destroy. No, we are not like that. In 20 after the earthquake, we are the one who saved ourselves, our brothers, our sisters. The international community didn't come to save us. No, we did it with our fingers, with our tools, So we support each other. And the way we are living as a community, me, I'm living with my all family. My mom has her house, my house is close to my parents' house. We are living, brothers, sisters, cousins, everyone who feel they need a place to stay, they can come and stay with us. So we support each other. We're still keeping that, that solidarity from Africa. So it's not because you are not a part of a family or a part of our family, you come, we're not gonna eat. No, you will eat. You're gonna get your dish, a plate. And that's the way we're living here. In my family, my mom's always had someone she always has a plate, an extra for someone who can come, who can stop by. That's the way we are living in Haiti. And I think if you know us better, you will ask for, your government about your taxes in what they are invest in Haiti. Your taxes, as your government is doing with your taxes, they are supporting gangs in Haiti to destroy us. They are supporting people who can buy guns to destroy all our men, our children, our husband, our brothers' lives. That's what they are doing here, actually. Your taxes are destroying our country. So, and I do believe if you learn to know us better, you will understand why we are struggling, why we are fighting for, why we want. Because sometimes I go on that radio, Radio Canada, and when I'm reading their comments, the people comment from Canada about Haiti. It's so sad. It's so sad because they think we are a bunch of monkey, a bunch of stupid, so they are not see us as a human, as a moon, because they said they are sending us money, we don't do nothing. But your country still the country will accept our government, the people of our government, to come to your country and buy for a house for $4 million. And you said you're a friend of us. You're not. And because the money they took to buy that kind of mansion is not their own money. That's the people's money. People who can go to hospital, they can get access to health care because of this. They can get access to a better education because of this. And still, Canada, France, USA support all those things. If you go to Miami, you're gonna see all those mansions, all those big houses, but by Haitian politicians. And they said they want to help us. How? When you send, when you send your money through UN, you know what they are doing with that money? They buy all office supplies. That's what they do with your money. And the money goes back to your country directly. They don't stay here to build people's life. If it stay, it's to destroy it, like to pay gang, like about the, that armed vehicle they talked about last week during that that operation they planned and they kill our brothers and husband in Village de Dieu. So they said, the journalist said, the armed vehicle was given to the police by U.S. embassy, and they called the government. It said, you know what? You have to find a way to get that armed vehicle back because that our people taxes. And they pay for to get back that armed vehicle, and they left our police officers' bodies behind. They didn't find for it. They don't ask, like, as a human, you will ask the government, you have to do whatever it takes to get to the family their son bodies. They don't ask for that. They ask for the armed vehicles. So that's what it costs, it counts more for the international community, an armed vehicle, but not us, not our, right. No, we don't count because they don't see us as a, like I said, as a moon, as a human being.
Thank you, Gabby, for that. And I think it from both of the comments, it just in my mind, the demonization of Black people across the world is kind of the root cause of the opposition to Haitian liberation and also the exploitation of and violent treatment of Black people here in Canada, because they see us as a threat and as violent. So that's why it represents, leads into this over incarceration in the criminal justice system, but also ploys to prohibit Black liberation because of this fear that, Black people are going to seek revenge and do the exact same thing that white people have done to Black people for centuries. But, I think that as the reparations, it just means giving back, and it's not charity, it's not pity, it's giving back what was stolen from Black people, years of exploitation and free labor that actually was helped to build what we now know as the global North, Canada and the United States, and they still benefit from, they have a vested interest in stifling Black liberation efforts in Haiti, so they can still benefit from the exploitation of Haitian resources and bring back the money here in Canada. So we have to continue to interrogate the ways in which we benefit from these exploitive colonial systems. And as both speakers have said, continue to hold our governments and our politicians accountable and keep being informed. And on that vein, really quickly, I wanted to know if there are any social media channels, since everything is virtually and on social media right now, for people who want to stay informed and follow and support. Where can they go to continue accessing these kind of the information from grassroots people on the ground that are telling the truth and the story of struggle and liberation in Haiti?
I can quickly say here, there's Solidarité Québec Haiti on Facebook. So it's Solidarité with E at the end, Québec, Haiti. And foreignpolicy.ca is also a website that produces a lot of good stuff with Eve Engler and others. And of course, they cover more than just Haiti, but Canadian foreign policy as a whole, the peace movement. There's also HaitiAction.net, which is based in the US, that produces a lot of very good stuff. My own website is jafrikayiti.com. I publish in English, French, and Haitian Creole. So people can find a number of things. So these days you will see that there is a hashtag that's very popular, that's trending on Twitter, which is Free Haiti. Except that, you know, we want to raise people's attention to the fact that there are a number of people who are saying that alone, this doesn't convey the whole message. It's free Haiti from imperialism, because there's this tendency of, you know, because I know the sister who started the Free Haiti movement. She's a strong anti-imperialist activist, Ezili Dantor. But recently, another group of people took that, and you know, so far their messaging is okay, but we see the opportunity for the imperialists to take this as an invitation. You know, like, we're gonna go free Haiti. Okay, no, we're not. You've done enough damage already. Please stay away. If you cannot help, do no harm, please. Haitians are not asking anybody to come and rescue them. Haitians will free Haiti from imperialism. And the best thing to do as a Canadian, that's what Patrick Kelly always said, be a citizen of your own country. Be a citizen of your own country. And it's not a trivial thing. It means to follow what's happening in the House of Commons, for instance, Monday, when they're going to table this thing. Another point I'd like to take the opportunity to make here is how in Canada, we have really a great opportunity here to build something that goes beyond Haiti, because I've had the privilege to attend a couple of conferences on reparations, we now have one thing that's not well known: leadership in the Caribbean and Latin America, in the person of Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, who was the first Latin American leader to espouse the reparations movement. And at that conference, when Nicolas Maduro was welcoming Africans from all over the world to say that, you know, we are going to be articulating the call for reparations to the First Nations people of Africa and of the Americas, because these are the first peoples who were affected. I, as the person who represented Haiti, and that's a strange thing because we do have a Haitian embassy in Caracas, but they weren't allowed to participate in a discussion on reparations. I represented Haiti, and I put on the table, because often it's forgotten when they talk about the states that participated in the kidnapping and enslavement of Africans. They talk about, you know, the states of France, you know, Britain and Spain, Portugal. However, oftentimes it's forgotten that the Holy See, the Catholic Church, is a legal entity that actively, in fact, they spun the movement with the papal bull of 1454, as well as the other churches, the so-called Protestant churches, because on the slave ship, such as the Jesus, for instance, that was kidnapping Africans, you would have the representatives of all these religions. Okay, so it's not a question of saying it's the Catholic Church as opposed to the Protestant, it's all of them. And so what we said, African people need to heal. And so I put on the table that the churches be asked or forced to return the keys of all of these buildings to the native people so that they can build their own infrastructures. Okay, so instead of spending their time wasting energy praying to white Jesus and all of these other non-existent figures, they can actually learn about Shaka Zulu, learn about Winnie Madikileza Mandela, learn about Robert Sobukwe, learn about Tupac Amaru, real people, Tecumseh the people who actually are making our world better, the Albert Einsteins of the world. Uh, because, you know, I mean, I don't know who is attending this event, but I don't think I am saying anything revolutionary here if I say that the white supremacist church is dying. Okay, I mean, many of these churches are closing anyways. But what people don't realize is that the church is the entity that stole the most property in the colonies. Okay, they didn't buy those lands. They didn't buy those churches. We need to understand that. In the case of Haiti, actually, the state not only was giving territory to the Catholic Church, but it's the meager budget of the Haitian state that was paying the priest. It's not the other way around. It's not the guys sitting in Rome in those, you know, golden buildings, because I had the opportunity to go and visit and I saw all the gold that's in there. And I know the Pope, every time there's a crisis, you know, he's crying, he's praying for the poor, sitting in the middle of all this gold. But what we're saying is that forget about that gold in Rome, but the land that the churches have in Haiti, in Guatemala, in Colombia, we need the native people to have access to those territories so they can have their own ceremonies, their own brainstormings, their own planning, and indeed healing. Because the first reparation is not monetary. And we're not, you know, spitting on the money. We need the money. Because, you know, you don't build universities on crumbs, okay? I've worked in the university system in Canada, and I know how many millions and billions that it takes to build a real university. Our people need the money, and the money needs to be returned. And we're talking here about two different things. There's reparations for stolen labor, and there's restitution. Because all of these instances of gunboat diplomacy, what it means is that the Europeans went to the Haitian harbor and they demanded ransom. Okay, there's a given year in 1883, it was the British who collected $1 million from the Haitian state. And they said, if you don't pay that money, we're gonna blow up the National Palace. A few months later, the Germans show up. Okay, so, and you can go and verify all of what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is that these are two different things. There's restitution of stolen money, cash, and there's reparations that needs to be calculated to be returned. But the first reparation is self-repair. And for the self-repair, that is what we call remembrer, to regain our brains, because Black people spend all of their energy thinking about what white people are gonna think about. You know, I was doing an interview the other day and the guy was telling me, it's a white liberal, that, well, if only you didn't use the word white supremacy, you would not alienate so many. I said, well, listen, when you go home, do you think about what Black people are thinking of you? Why should I be spending my energy about your comfort? Listen, the thing exists. What we need to do is to fight it. And what sometimes people forget is that white supremacy doesn't care about your skin tone. It offers an opportunity for all of us to be a supporter of white supremacy. Colin Powell was supporting white supremacy. I don't know whether he was doing it willingly or unwillingly, but he was. He was part of that coup in Haiti. As a light-skinned Haitian, I have white privilege in Haiti. John Brown, who was one of the whitest men in the United States, okay, he was fighting white supremacy. He is the one who fought for real in the United States and led a revolt. And when the United States killed John Brown, Haiti was so touched by this white man who took the cause that wasn't apparently his to his death. Haiti decreed 3 days of mourning for John Brown and collected money to send to his wife in the United States. So what we're talking about here is not a black-white thing. We are all engaged in this so that our children can inherit a better world than this thing that we now have. And that's also the lesson that I took when I went up north, whether it is in Nunavut or in Yellowknife. You know, we have human populations that are endangered. And sometimes I hear my environmentalist friends cry because an elephant has been killed in Africa. I mean, of course I am touched by the killing of elephants. We see these criminals go out there and they're killing elephants, lions, and everything. But we have human populations that are disappearing in front of our eyes. Populations whose genetic material will no longer exist if we allow them to disappear. We need to wake up. I mean, we cannot allow disease to go up north and kill the population in Nunavut when Canada is such a rich country. So this is what we're talking about here. We're not talking about a question of black, white. We're talking about our planet, and to understand that those people, when you hear Gabi talk, and you know, I've been with Sister Gabi for a number of years here since I've discovered her. I asked my wife for permission to communicate with her as much as possible, because she doesn't want to be doing activism 24/7. I mean, who wants to do that?
Nobody.
Right? Her daughter, her son deserve to go watch movies, you know, sit by the beach. And that's what we all deserve. And that's the dream of Haiti. Haiti was meant to be an oasis of peace so that we can welcome people in our country and live life with peace. And so when I meet activists like you, brothers and sisters, I tend to speak too much, but it's because we don't get to see you every day. You know, someone made the comment about, you know, Gabi was making the comment about these very distressing messages that she saw on CBC Radio Canada websites about people bragging, well, we gave you all of this money, what did you do with it? And I'm glad there's a sister a brother who said that, well, yeah, but these are narrow-minded individuals. That's true. And so that's why when I meet people like you, we need to amplify your messages, your presence, so that the Haitians know that, listen, you know, there are some decent people in Canada as well.
Thank you so much, Jafrikayiti. You touched on so many points that I can't even comment on, you know, the separation of church and state and the role of the church in, you know, enhancing white supremacy or perpetuating white supremacy and maintaining it, to colorism and how, you know, the color of your skin and how people, different people, even different racial groups, or people within specific racial groups can benefit from white supremacy through colorism and internalized racism. But I think collective action is needed to address all these things. And it's not just Haiti, but again, it's a global struggle against anti-Black racism that we need to dismantle. I see that the time we've went a little bit over time. So now I'll give Gabi I would love to comment on all of these very important and interesting topics, but I wanted to give Gabi the opportunity to do a brief closing remark, and then I'll pass it over to Terry to send us off. But thank you so much. It's been a pleasure listening to all the speakers today, and I learned so much from each and every one of you.
Thank you, Raymond. So I just want to thank you guys. Thank you for that opportunity you gave me today to talk about the moon, about the Haitian struggle as a mother, as an aunt, as a sister, as a human being, you know. And so it's you know, it helped me too, because I got Jafrik knows sometimes he is the one who told me, you have to take a break, Gabrielle. You have to do something for yourself and don't think about. But I can't because every time I go somewhere, it's the same thing I face and I have to fight. So and like Jafrik said, it's a very it's an honor for me to have that opportunity to have you guys to talk about what's going on the ground, because that's what we're living day after day. And so it will be always a pleasure to talk whenever you want, guys. So thank you so much. And in my behalf, in behalf of the Haitian people, we really thank you for the kind of friend you are, because you are seeking for the truth. So thank you again. And, you know, whenever you want, you can have me, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I like Husoni, I have a billion things running through my mind and heart. I'm like, oh, we could go for another 4 hours. But I also recognize and I appreciate what you said, Jafrikayiti. There isn't often this kind of opportunity to get together, and it helps all of us to go back to our work and to do it effectively. And we need to keep strengthening each other as we do this. And I just wanted to pick out 3 threads, and I'm going to miss a whole bunch of other ones, but 3 ones that jumped out to me. Elle saying, what do we value and what do we resource? You know, and that's really one of the big questions that for all of us. And Jafrikayiti saying, be a citizen of your own country. And that really struck me, that, you know, in our work as people who want to be allies, who want to act effectively as citizens of Canada, what do we do? And so on that, I wanted to point out that both the Global Social Justice Project and the Atlantic Regional Solidarity Network, which has worked in solidarity with people of the Americas for a long time, both of those organizations are happy to think about future events and activities that could be helpful or useful. So please, people can give us feedback, and we will be providing resources and links to all of you after the fact. So anything that Jafrikayiti or Gabrielle or Husoni want to forward to us for thinking about future actions, we'll incorporate it and we'll let everybody who's in this room know about that stuff. And I just wanted to conclude with just the thoughts that Gabrielle shared about the importance of us sharing stories amongst one another, because then it's these places where we can share our stories where we really see each other. You know, we see the mother, we see the children, we see each other as human beings. And so I feel like there's these different pieces that we're doing, the activism, the solidarity, the education, the work of resistance and struggle, but there's also the sharing and the important seeing of one another that we need to do in these kind of events. So thank you, Gabrielle, for reminding us of that. And on that note, I just want to thank everybody for coming, and hopefully we'll see you in future Politics of Hope events and future Atlantic Regional Solidarity Network events. And in the meantime, keep up the good work, and we're with you.
Thank you.
We can go to our closing song that people will want to listen to. By Resistance.
Mais nous pas tomber, nous sommes peuple qui gagne résistance. Nous passer journée sans manger, nous traverser désert à pied, nous fait nuit sans ne pas faire manger. Nous sommes peuple qui gagne résistance. Résistance, oh, résistance, oh, nous sommes peuple qui gagne résistance. Résistance, oh, résistance, oh, nous sommes peuple qui gagne résistance. Résistance, 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 résistance. Résistance, 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 résistance. Nous apprenons marcher en bataille, qu'un souffle nous en balle en mer. Défendre tête nous contre toute mauvaise air. Nous sommes peuple qui gagne résistance. Yo pilé, yo pas s'acraser, yo mouillé, yo pas s'avaler. Nous dit pas son roche color roche. Nous sommes peuple qui gagne résistance. Résistance, oh, résistance, oh. Nous sommes peuple qui gagne résistance. Résistance, oh, résistance, oh. Nous sommes peuple qui gagne résistance. toute manève, nous sommes peuple qui gagne résistance.
Résistance, oh, résistance, oh, nous sommes peuple qui gagne résistance. Résistance, oh, résistance, oh, nous sommes peuple qui gagne résistance. Résistance, 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 résistance. Résistance, 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 résistance.
N'allons faire sans nous pas mourir, nous troquer corps n'a Lucifer. Nous dit nous croyons en paradis, nous sommes peuple qui gagne résistance.